The term werewolf appears in Tolkien's mythology, for example in the Silmarillion, but it is also at least one time mentioned in The Lord of the Rings itself. Interestingly, here it does not mean a man that transforms into a wolf during full moon, but an big and evil wolf entity. Further, we also have the warg, which potentially has a quite similar function in Tolkien's work. So what is the difference between a warg and a werewolf? And that will be the topic for the video today. My name is Chris, aka ThePhilosophersGames, and as always, I try to pronounce names as Tolkien described it. Spoiler warning, and also Happy Halloween. One of the earliest mentions of the term warg I could find in the book The Shaping of Middle-earth, which is the History of Middle-earth, book number 4, and there Tolkien made a list with basically Old English name equivalents to existing names from his mythology. And it appears for the name Balrog, which he translated to Old English with Bialowerch. And Bialo means something like evil, while Werch means something like felon, outlaw, or accursed being. Interestingly, in Old Norse, a similar word exists, so they are related, in the form of Vargr, which means wolf, but can also mean outlaw, so a wolf in not a really literal sense. And I find it very interesting that this is like one of the first mentions of this. I'm not 100% sure when Tolkien made this list, but somewhere between 1926 to the 1930s. So this could be also from the time when he started working on The Hobbit or not, because in The Hobbit, wargs definitely appear already. The term werewolf appears for the first time in the History of Middle-earth book number 3, at least there the text is published, and the texts there are also from these 1920s, so both terms are quite old as a result. Further, the idea that wolves and also wolf riders are on the side of evil, so on the side of Melkor, or Melko as he was called back then, we find even in the Book of Lost Tales Part 2. So in text from 1917, so this is very old, ancient you could say. So you can definitely say that having evil wolves fighting on the side of evil is definitely something Tolkien had in mind for basically almost ever. Now, what exactly are these men-wolves, these werewolves in Tolkien's universe? Tolkien describes them as fell beasts inhabited by dreadful spirits that he had imprisoned in their bodies. This, of course, as always, implies that Melkor can't just create sentient life. Werewolves can to some extent even speak at times. As a result, they are more than just animals. And for this to work, Melkor has to take an existing being and then modify it, or in this case, put an evil spirit inside it. For example, we know Sauron or his earlier iteration, a character called Thu as Necromancer, and also Bose as Lord of Werewolves, which is very interesting. So Thu and Sauron have definitely a lot of things in common in this regard, and you can always argue that when they have spirits that serve them, then of course this also applies to Melkor. And that they are possessed by spirits makes complete sense when we think of the most prominent werewolves, which would be Drauglin, the father of werewolves, the first werewolf, and Karcharos, the greatest of the werewolves. Both appear in the story of Beren and Luthien, and we know that Drauglin could even talk to Sauron. But what is now the definition of a warg? According to a letter Tolkien wrote in 1966, which was just recently published as letter 290a, we can read, warg is simple. It is an old word for wolf, which also had the sense of an outlaw or hunted criminal. We mentioned this earlier. This is its usual sense in surviving texts. I adopted the word, which had a good sound for the meaning, as a name for this particular brand of demonic wolf in the story. Or in footnote 4 of letter 297 we can also read, warg used in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings for an evil breed of demonic wolves. So what does demonic wolf mean exactly in this particular context is hard to say, but it says it's a breed and they were kind of demonic, so like an evil spirit possessing them as well would be a possible interpretation. As a result, you can make an argument that there is not that much difference between a werewolf and a warg, to be honest. Still, in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien differentiates between these two terms. As Gandalf says, not all his servants and chattels are wraiths. There are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves, and there have been and still are many men, warriors and kings that walk alive under the sun and yet are under his sway. Wargs are definitely also more than just big evil wolves. For example, in the chapter The Ring Goes South in The Lord of the Rings, Frodo and his companions are attacked by wargs at night, and through Gandalf's fire magic they can defend themselves. And we can read that Legolas' arrow is ignited mid-air and pierces the heart of the warg chieftain, but the next day they could not find any of the corpses. So in this context, I always thought that wargs are kind of the third age iteration of werewolves, and beyond that are mostly the same, potentially even similar to orcs and goblins. Though one particular difference might be the ability to talk in some way, at least in a fair language it seems, though even that is debatable, because in The Hobbit we can read, and in the middle of the circle was a great grey wolf. He spoke to them in the dreadful language of the wargs. Gandalf understood it, Bilbo did not, but it sounded terrible to him, and as if all their talk was about cruel and wicked things, as it was. To be fair, in The Hobbit a lot of animals can also talk, so that's maybe not an indicator and more part of the character of the book, but on paper, you can definitely make an argument into this direction as well, that also wargs could talk to some extent. They even had their own language, it seems, or it could be just black speech, of course. As you can see, it's very difficult to find many differences between a warg and a werewolf, and I really tried. And the biggest one might be that orcs sometimes used wargs to ride on them. That's basically the biggest difference. I think that was not mentioned really for werewolves, though Karcharos was for sure big enough to have somebody ride on him. And further, we also have the mention of wolf riders in the Book of Lost Tales very early on as well. So in conclusion, I think that wargs are just the further development or iteration of a werewolf, and beyond that they are basically the same. There might be some properties that have changed over time on this different type of creature, but these are for sure not very clear to me after doing quite a bit of research on this particular topic. Thank you for watching and happy Halloween. I hope you enjoyed this little lore video that feels a bit unconclusive at the end, to be honest, but maybe tell me in the comments what your interpretations or theories or headcanon is regarding the difference between a werewolf and a warg in Tolkien's work. Also, feel free to press the like button and subscribe if you want to be notified getting more lore videos here on the channel. Also, there will be a book lore discussion live stream this week as well. Maybe check that out if you want to join there. And shoutouts to all my supporters. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. And again, thank you for watching and see you people next time. Goodbye.